So the 7 universal core skills, if you have any more questions about, or you'd like to dig into more details about any of these, you can go to accessibility.umn.edu, but we'll be talking about the different parts of it. So links, color, video captions, alt text for images, tables, and we'll be talking about each of those and how they apply to Google Docs today, or Microsoft Word documents, or PDFs. So what to share and when to share it. When you're adding Google Docs or Word documents or PDFs in your Canvas courses, I feel like it's best to share the source documents as best as you can. That applies for Google Docs, and there is benefits to sharing the source document for your Google Doc. There is advantages to sharing the Word document, and there's advantages to sharing the original PDF. So if you read it, if you're linking to a PDF that is a reading from a journal, it's best to link to the original source of that journal. Don't make a copy of it and add it to your Canvas files. Link to the source document as best as you can, because that get updated. If the accessibility of that document gets updated, everybody gets that updated file. There's caveats with that I'll be talking about in the next slide. If any content can be published, especially content that will have tables, which we'll be talking about later, like a syllabus, it's best to publish it on a Canvas page, not in a Word document, not in a Google Doc, not in a PDF. We see a lot of those. If it's a worksheet, use assignments, use quizzes, use anything in Canvas that is built in, because accessibility is built into those Canvas pages. The tables become a lot more accessible than in a Word document or a Google Doc. So when possible, if it has an equivalent use in Canvas, use Canvas pages. You can give access in advance to the students whenever possible, especially students with disabilities. They will benefit from that because they get to catch up and know what you'll be talking about in the session. This way they can prepare if they need to. Sometimes give even a 1 hour advance notice, allowing them to take a sneak peek and prepare themselves for the topic would be ideal. So with documents best practices, in the sense that what not to do here, we're going to be talking about, what are the disadvantages of each. That's what I'm going to start. So with Google Docs, they really don't convert to PDFs well. So if you're trying to use a Google Doc, then make it a PDF. The same thing with Google Slides. If you convert it to PDF, do not do that. They do not convert to PDFs well. From an assistive technology perspective, for people with disabilities, all the tags that you worked so hard to make it accessible in a Google Doc will not translate very well. The alternative is to save it as Microsoft Word from Google Doc, then from Microsoft Word to PDF, if you must go that route. Also, when it comes to collaboration, Google Docs is a great tool for collaboration. You can have multiple people in the same document, but it gets distracting for someone who is using a screen reader, because it announces every single person that is editing every single line. So depending on your class size, if it's five or less, it's okay. But when it gets to be 100 people in the same document, the content is lost, because someone who's using a screen reader will read all the people names and will never read the content. They'll never be able to read any content, because the screen reader is reading all the names first. With Word documents, use the Save As PDF, not the Print to PDF. Save As PDF keeps accessibility that you worked into the document, and that stays in. With with the Print to PDF, the same thing happens as a Google Doc. All the accessibility stuff get lost. The Word documents, unless you're using Office 365, sometimes doesn't have a lot of collaboration features. So it's a static copy that the student can download and edit. And even if it has, if you missed a few accessibility issues, the DRC will be able to access a lot of that and remediate much easier than a PDF. So Word document is a great, um, you know, Google Docs and Microsoft Word are great alternatives to PDF. If you must go to PDF, it's extremely difficult to remediate. It's there's no collaboration, and it is a static copy. So with Google Docs, for example, if you update something and you have it linked in your Canvas course, everybody gets that update without you having to do anything. With the PDF, you have to delete it, you have to upload a new copy. And if you've done the save as from Word, hopefully not from Google Docs, again, it's a multi-step process for you to add PDFs. So a syllabus, worksheet, all of that stuff, I really recommend that you keep it on Canvas, use Canvas native functionality. But for readings and copyrighted material, you can use the source document from the library course reserve. If you must download a copy, then I would suggest you really make sure or try to figure out some accessibility um, things you know, to test it for accessibility. Adobe Acrobat Pro has an accessibility checker. If it's not accessible, I would reach out to the DRC or the libraries and they will help you make it accessible. So let's start. You know, what I'll be talking about, a lot of the techniques that I'll be talking about today will help students with disabilities, but honestly, they'll help everybody, depending or also on their environment. So we'll be talking primarily, and you'll hear me talk about a screen reader user. I'm a screen reader user myself. The first couple of tips will benefit somebody with low vision and a student with dyslexia. So when you start a document, obviously you have to have text in it. You have to type your lines. And then you set the document language. I do want to add here that the document language is always inherited from your operating system. So if you have English United States as your operating system, default language Word will take that and Google Docs will take that. So if you're typing in Spanish and Portuguese, for example, then or if your computer is set to Spanish, then the document language is set automatically by default to whatever the operating system is taking it. I'll be showing that mine is English, so you'll see my Google Docs is set to English. If I need to write a document in any other language that is German or Spanish or Italian, then I must change the document language there. So we'll go to typography. We have to make sure text is no smaller than 12 point. Word and Google Docs, their default is 11. So if you haven't changed your default font to 12, always do that. The minimum is start with a 12, do not go to 11. Use sans serif fonts. My favorite are Arial and Verdana, but any sans serif font will work. Avoid other fonts that are not as accessible. Helvetica is another good one. And for students with dyslexia and students who have other disabilities as well, avoid at all costs typing in all caps, unless it's an acronym or something like that. So at this point, I would ask you, you know, if you have any questions, start adding them in the chat. We'll try to get to them as I'm going on the slides or towards the end, either way. The next topic we'll be talking about is headings. That's heading level 1, heading level 2, 3, and 4. You can do that on Canvas pages. You can do that in documents, in a Word doc or Google Doc. It's extremely difficult, as I said, in PDFs to remediate some of that. So if you don't include it in the source document of Google Doc and Word, whichever you started with to convert to PDF, it's hard. Make your headings bold, they stand out, but bold is an additional style, not the heading style. So don't just enlarge it, don't just bold it, you have to make it a heading first, then bold it. With every document, there's a heading level 1. That's the title of the document. So whether a Google Doc, a Word document, or a PDF, each document must have a heading level 1, and that's the title of the document, not the name of the file. Sometimes they're the same, but usually the document title, depending on what it is, like you'll see my document that I'll be talking about, demonstrating live later, called Dragons. So I'm talking about dragons. So that's going to be my heading 1. Do not use the title feature in Google Doc or Microsoft Word. Those do not convert the same way. Screen reader users rely on the heading level 1 to tell the title. So heading level 2, you can set it to 18 point and again bold. That is the sub-content, and that goes under level 1. So whatever the title of the document is, the sub-content of that is level 2. And the subtitles are level 2, so the sub-content is level 3. Level 4 is a sub of 3. I suggest that you don't go to level 5 or 6 unless you have to. So 5 and 6 only if you're going as far as having disclaimers into your documents, then you can have that as level 5 and 6. You see level 5 becomes 12 point, the same as a regular font. The screen reader will still be able to differentiate that because the heading style is applied, but also somebody who's looking at it visually will know that it's different than a regular text because it's bolded. But again, heading level 5 and 6, if you can avoid them, don't go as deep unless it's a really complex document. So this is a heading example. So this is an essay. So if you think of the heading structure as an essay, the Shawshank Redemption under the intro, which the intro is a sub of the title of that essay. Under the intro, there's 2 level 3s, and so the level 2 has a level 3 in it. Always stay in order as well. Don't go to level 3 if you don't have a 2. Don't start with a 2 if you don't have a title for the document, and so on. It's really important when you do the heading structure to use, when you use it, that allows you to also create a table of content, which we'll be demonstrating as well later. The next, we'll talk about paragraphs. You can add spaces after each paragraph, expand the space between paragraphs to visually let anyone reading it, it's easier. Don't add a line that becomes a blank line. So I'll show you how to add the spacing into and add a space after a paragraph without you having to add a line. The other thing to do in a paragraph, sometimes Google Docs has it set to the spaces between lines to 1.15. I like Google Docs more than the Word documents. Word is set to 1.08. I think 1.15 to 1.25 is the best. Don't go more than 1.5. Becomes really hard for someone with low vision or students who have reading disabilities to keep track of where the next line begins because there's too much spaces. It's distracting for them. Don't ever do double lines. I know some faculty depend on that for writing comments in between, especially when you're doing essays and things like that. But for when you're doing it as a faculty in Canvas for students to read, 1.15, which is the Google default, is better than the Word document. So I'll show you how to set it in both Word and Google Doc if you want to change it. So this can go either way. You can use one space between sentences after the period, that is, or 2 spaces. It's up to you. Some people prefer 2 spaces. My recommendation, whatever you do, don't mix it. Don't mix and match. If you do one space after a period, then keep one space. If you do two spaces, then please be consistent for the rest of the document. Always use left align text. Don't center or justify. I think the only time I would like to see centering, maybe if possible, is for the title of the document. That's the heading level 1. But again, you don't have to. Justified makes it really hard to read because it adds a lot of spaces between words, and it becomes really hard to follow. So don't use justified font at all cost. Text decoration, if you do bold to add emphasis, sometimes is not enough. Add words if it's important. Add the word important for it. Italics are really hard for some people to read. So again, don't use it as the only means of telling information. Someone who's totally blind will not be able to see the bold. Their assistive technology will not read it automatically. So if you're adding for the word, if you add the word important, add an asterisk next to the words. That helps sometime to distinguish and add a different way of distinguishing the information to make it stand out. Underlines is only for links inside a document. Do not, you don't have to. It gets a little confusing if you start to underline too many things, because then it takes away the importance of the underlining. Color and contrast. So use black on white for print. If you're using either one for print or online, it's important to keep the contrast ratio in perspective. So black on white is 21:1. Any other color starts to go down. So you have blue is 7.5:1. If you use, I think green is 4:1, which does not pass. Yellow is one of the worst. It's almost 1 point something. It's very low. I'll be demonstrating a tool for you to check your color contrast as well. Do not rely on color alone, the same way we said for bold and italic and strict throw for importance. The color should not be the only way to tell that something is really important. So if an assignment is due date is coming and you do it in red only, add the word, the words upcoming, or why you're using the red color in addition, because some people cannot see color, and sometimes the color contrast, if it's not strong enough, people will have a hard time reading it. Next, we'll talk about bulleted and numbered list. Use the built-in list into Google Docs and Word document. There's no built-in into PDF, but at this day and age, I think it's extremely hard. When I was trying to demonstrate some of that, it's really hard to kind of not use the built-in tool. Whatever you do, Google Docs and Word document will try to guess that you're trying to do a bulleted list and will automatically convert it to a bulleted list. That's fine. I think the only exceptions are the dash and the tilde, which ironically enough, I saw very, very few people use it, but some people do. So if you use the dash or the tilde, that will not be converted. If you use anything else, like 1 period, that will become, the next element will be 2. If you do an asterisk, then that will be converted into a bulleted point. So you can use any of the built-in bulleted points that you have in either one, and those are accessible. Sequential content should be numbered, and when the content is not important, it doesn't follow a logical order. They don't have to go 1, 2, 3. Then you can do bulleted lists. So with dashes, Google Docs and Word documents do not convert those automatically to bulleted lists. So if you're using dashes, don't. They will not be signified as a bulleted list. If you're using it to hyphenate words, that's fine, but do not use dashes for bulleted lists. So with sentences, try to keep your sentences short, 15 to 20 words each sentence. Each paragraph, 3 to 5 sentences. The reading level, 6th to 8th grade. You know, you can go higher than that. It's really a recommendation, but it's best for everybody. When you use an acronym, always spell it out the first time. This is taken from the Web Content Accessibility Guideline for document usage. If you're copying from an alternative source on the web, copy without formatting. On Windows computer, it's Control-Shift-V to copy to paste without the formatting. On a Mac, I think it's Command-Shift-V. When you're using links in your documents, be specific. The link should be telling the person who's going to click on it where they're going to go with before they click on it. Be sincere with your links and make them be substantial, that they're giving enough information without being too long. And stop using the word link here, click more. So sincere, be as honest as you can to the document itself. Don't link, do not mislead someone with your link is what I'm trying to say. When it comes to images and media, avoid images with text inside them. If it has text, then use the text inside a document. So there's images that are considered decorative. Those are for feel good, look good, to make your document stand out. The border around a document is decorative. Whereas if you do a picture of a frame, that might not be decorative depending on the context of your document. Avoid decorative images into your files, especially when we are talking in the context of Canvas as LMS. You know, you're adding pictures to signify meaning. There is a value to those pictures that you're adding into your documents. So usually, even if you mark it as decorative, and Office 365, the most recent version, will allow you to add it as decorative, Google Docs will not. So the decorative pictures will always be read as an image, and most students who can't see it, most people who can't see it will assume that there is something here that you're trying to add to the value of the page, even though you didn't mean it, but the students will feel like they missed something. Describe the images as best as you can. It's best to stay between 100 and 150 characters. Complex images usually are 150 characters or more. That text, if it's 150, if you need a long text to describe your images, then you should be describing it for everybody in the body of the document, not in the alternative text. So this is a complex image that will take more than 150 characters. So it has a lot of text to talking about the different Stephen King books that um, the different books that were converted into movies by Stephen King, and then the longer the text, the more complex it is. You can go around the complex images by typing half of the, so you can type half of the alt text in the body of the document, and whatever is strictly visual meaning, you can add it to the alt text. So this way you can lessen the number of characters for the alternative text in the alt text itself. So this is the same image, how you add it into the adjacent text. Now we're gonna jump into tables. With tables in both Google Docs and Word documents, it's really difficult to make them accessible for screen readers. But if you use it, please only use it for data tables. What I mean by data tables, so if you have a table with a name of a person, the phone number, the email, that's considered the data table because you have 10 people that you're going to give the names, email, and phone numbers for. That's a data table. So the top row is going to be name, phone number, and email. That's the header row, and all the information that follows in that table is data. So when a screen reader is trying to read row 10, they're going to know that email belongs to who without having to read all three cells in that row, because the screen reader will be able to read the header row as this is an email column, and I'm reading the email for John Smith, for example. So avoid layout tables, do not merge cells, do not have nested tables. If you must use a table, especially in a syllabus format, for example, where I know it gets used a lot, that is best displayed in an HTML. I mentioned that earlier on either the syllabus tool in Canvas or a Canvas page if the syllabus tool doesn't work for you. And when you update it, all the students will see it instead of a Word document where they download that document and never gets updated. A Google Doc gets updated, but again, the tables are not as friendly in Google Doc. I would, um, as a screen reader user myself, every time there's a table in a Google Doc, I download it into a Word document because it's way easier for me to read it in a Word document. Yeah, absolutely not for layout. And I talk about that from an experience, taking a course where the syllabus had 37 layout tables, and nothing I said could convince that faculty that I'm not able to read that content in 37 tables, and converting it to a much more accessible format. Yes, change the look and feel of the document, but honestly, when your students are looking into the syllabus document, they really don't care about the feel good of that document. They want to get the due dates. They want to get the information about the course. They want to get what is the grading schema that you're using. What points I'm going to be responsible for. That kind of information. The information in the document is what's important, not the way it looks. You can make the heading structure achieve more than the table layout. Table layout, it gets really confusing, and students with disabilities get lost in that document. And then, so for the table of content, add table of content for any page, any document that is 3 pages or longer, depending on also how complex it is. If it has multiple headings and you want people to find a structure in it much faster, That's another way of going around those layout tables, because sometimes you use layout tables to make students find things visually easier, but for someone who can't see it, then the layout tables are not helpful. But the table of content is a lot easier to read. The links become there automatically to jump to the specific content that you want. Use the built-in tool in Google Docs, which I'll demonstrate after I add my heading structure in a few minutes. One of the things that you is probably not known to too many people. I see a lot of people who add return lines to go to a new page. So if you want that your paragraph to start on a new page or new content to start on a new page, use a page break. That doesn't add return lines to the document, whereas in a Word document or a Google Doc, if you add 10 returns, the screen reader or someone who's using Dragon because they have a physical disability will read each line of those 10 line breaks that you added, whereas if you add a page break, it will go automatically to the next content. In Google Doc and Word document, the shortcut is the same. It's Control Enter, but it's under Insert Page Break. We mentioned, so the last one I'm going to talk about is headers and footers. That becomes really handy for a long document. Use the headers, add the page numbers, add pagination to the headers. Make sure they're right aligned. It's easier for people to see it if it's right aligned. So that's an example of a paginated page 3. Avoid footers if possible. Screen reader users don't get that information for the footer or the header, but it does benefit other people with disabilities as well. The screen reader automatically read the pages without having to rely on the header and the footer. So avoid italics. So automated pagination, you add a text and the number, so page 3, for example, that becomes a paginated header. So I'm gonna do a document that I'm gonna demonstrate right now. So I have a Google Doc here with content inside it. So some of this information is from Wikipedia. I took that information and put it in a Google Doc. When I started, I did the text, copied it and pasted it into a Google Doc with removing all the formatting. So all the heading structure is missing, no table of content, no, the links are not descriptive, the images have no alt text. So really this document is just blocks of text, paragraph style. The line spacing by default for Google Doc is 1.15. So I'll show you first the document language, then we'll talk about the font and the font size. So you'll see in the document, you see that the document language here is set to English United States because my operating system is set to that. Google Docs sets that stuff by default. If your operating system is Spanish, then you'll see that your documents automatically inherits the Spanish language here. Same thing with a Word document. So with the line spacing, you have single, 1.15 is checked. This is where you can add the space after the paragraph. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all my text, and I'm going to do custom spacing. I'm going to apply it. I'm going to also add the line space after the paragraph. I'm going to add the space after the paragraph. So that kind of set my paragraphs apart a little bit. I'm going to change the font from 11 to 12 because, again, Google Docs font by default is 11. The same thing with a Word document. So I increased it by 1 point to 12. Next, we're going to apply the headings. So I mentioned that the heading structure each, so I can make it, I applied bold. If you do it before, not sure if the bold remains when you add a heading style. So I can make it larger. So I'm increasing the font, but that's not the way to make a heading. A lot of people make it bold and increase the font. That did not make it a heading. That just added font and style. So to make it a heading, so the paragraph style is what we're looking for. So there is it's set to normal text. This is the title that I was talking about earlier. Please do not use that title. Functionality is not the same as a heading level 1. Neither the subtitle is not a heading level 2 either. So do not use those two. So this is what we'll be using is heading level 1. We can update all our heading level 1s to match, but since there's only one heading level 1, we're going to keep it at that. So now it's a heading level 1. So that's the heading level 1. I'm going to do. So here's my sub content. So the same thing. I have a keyboard shortcut, so I'm gonna show you how to do a heading level 2, where to access it. But after that, I'm gonna start using my keyboard shortcuts, and I'm gonna tell you what those are also. So that's heading 2. I'm also gonna bold it. So I applied the bold. I'm gonna increase the font to 80. Yes, the heading structure does convert to Word document well, and then from Word to PDF also converts. But if you convert it from Google Docs to PDF directly, that does not. So Dragon Myths is another sub. It's a sub, so that's a. I'm going to do this at level 3. Bold it, and I'm going to increase it to 14. So now what I can do is, so let's say the word theories, I'm going to do it a heading level 2, but this is not bold. So what I can do is, if I apply, so if I apply the style that I used for this heading, so if I update all heading 2s to match, now all the heading 2s in the document will be updated to whatever I set as the first one. So you don't have to go change all the heading level 2s in that document. If you update to match, all the heading 2s in your documents get updated. So model depictions will also be a heading level 2. And the Windows keyboard shortcut is Control-Alt-2. Not sure. I think it's Command Control-2 on a Mac is your keyboard shortcut to automatically convert it, but it's under the format option. I'm using Arial font. That's one thing I skipped, but that's the Google Doc default. Calibri is the Word default. Calibri is okay, but Arial, Verdana, or Helvetica, again, are better. Any sans serif is good. Usually the sans serifs don't have the curved endings, and you can apply, once you set any style, whether the style of the heading, the style of the paragraph, the font, you can apply all of this to your default document. So you can change all of these and apply them all to your default documents. So the next time you open a new Google Doc, all that stuff will be applied automatically. So the next thing I'm going to do is there's a bulleted list that I'm going to make a bulleted list here. I'm going to show you. So this is a heading level 3. So if I make this here, all these lines as a bulleted list, it has 6 items. I did the keyboard shortcut, but if you use the built-in tool, make it a bullet, insert a bulleted list, you can select it and make it all a bulleted list automatically. But if I undo, and I do, see, I did an asterisk space and it converted automatically into a bullet. And now if I press an enter at the end of that line, it converts it automatically to bullet. So what I'm going to do is undo both. And I'm going to use that dash that I talked about earlier. Actually, Google Docs converts the dash into, I'm going to use the tilde. Word, I guess, doesn't do the dash, not Google Docs. So if you use, it's really difficult to break the bulleted list into a Google Doc. See, that did not convert it into a bulleted list. So what I'm saying is don't do that. Google Docs will try to guess, and Word document will try to guess that you're trying to do a bulleted list and will automatically convert it. That's fine. So again, I'm going to put it as a bulleted list here because it's not a sequential order, so there is no level of importance. And yes, do not use dash to create bulleted lists. even though Google Doc converted it into a bulleted list, but I don't think it's a good way to do it. So now that we have our heading structure, we have our font. One thing is missing in this document. Again, I don't have a table because I avoid tables in Google Docs as best as I can, even though, again, if you use it for data tables, it's okay. Just don't merge the cells. Make sure you have a header row and a header column if possible. Do not use it for layout. So the one thing that is missing here now is, well, two more things. So I have links. So I have click here and I have the link, the word link. Those are not accessible. So if you know, it takes very little for you to change that text into, so you can change the click here. I'm talking about images. Those, I said I took this article from Wikipedia. So if you're going to read more about the way dragons were depicted um, in different cultures, there's a Wikipedia article. So in this, a Wikipedia article is better, more descriptive than click here. Um, so I'm telling them where they're gonna go find it and what it's gonna talk about um, in that article. So again, so link is the same thing in. It takes some creative writing sometime, you know, to make the link be more descriptive and telling where the where where the person who's clicking on this link is going to go, but it benefits everybody. And be consistent with your links. So if you're linking to assignment 1 or week 1 due dates, be consistent. So don't call it assignment 1 in one sentence and then project 1 in another sentence, or have a different title for it, like, you know, discussion 1, whatever it is. Be consistent in the naming, in the sense that if you use assignment 1, stick with assignment 1. If you use the title of the assignment, which is introduce yourself, then use the introduce yourself link all the time. Don't call it assignment 1 and introduce yourself somewhere else, even though they're both the same. Introduce yourself is usually more telling, but also assignment 1 is also for someone who wants to keep a logical order. In a numbering sequence is fine as well. It's more telling, but could be assignment 1, introduce yourself, which is more consistent. So with the alt text, these images, so I'm gonna do the alt text for.
While you're looking for this, we have 5 minutes left.
Okay, so I can answer any questions. I'm just going to show you how to add the alt text to the document. And when we're talking about the alt text, try to be as descriptive as possible. So in these images that I have, so this image is a dragon on a Russian ship. I know that the alt text that Wikipedia had is a lot more descriptive than what I'm seeing now. I've used this as a demo article more than the actual content. So I'll be happy to answer any questions that I missed, or if there are any, feel free to unmute as well.
I have a question about the images. Does size, like those 3 images are different sizes? Does that matter? Does the spacing of the images matter?
Not really. It depends what you're trying to tell. For me, this was just, I'm trying to conserve space here, so I wanted them in the same line. But the alt text is what is really more important. The size, I think it takes a default size that you do depending on the content of the image. So the middle one is bigger because I think vertically it needed to be bigger to make the whatever is in it look better. If you shrink it, I think it takes the quality of the image away.
What does alt text do? So what does it do, alt text?
So someone who's using a screen reader, like me, will not be able to tell what those images are. The alt text reads it aloud or describes it for someone who can't see it.
And it wouldn't add text, it would just store, like, I mean, it wouldn't be real. I don't know if I...
Yeah, so it's in the background, it's not an actual text on the page. The alt text is in the back of the image, hidden from visual, but if the image doesn't load, the alt text will load instead.
And what are decorative images that you were mentioning, Colin?
Decorative images are images that make a document look good, but they don't add value to the document. So here I'm talking about dragon. I'm showing you different images of dragons being depicted in different ways. That's adding content to the document. It's not adding a decorative image. If I'm adding an arrow, a picture of an arrow pointing to something, that might be decorative depending on what you're trying to achieve with that image. So if it's not adding any value to the text around it, then it's decorative.
And can you specify, I think you mentioned you can specify that in Word or Office?
In Office 365, there's a checkbox. Not all Word versions have it, so only Office 365, there's a checkbox to mark it as decorative. In Google Docs, it does not. In Canvas, yes, you can mark it as decorative, which will make anyone who's using a screen reader skip it. That's what the value of the decorative means. So someone who can't see it will not even know a picture is there. So imagine if you're trying to look at that document, if you didn't see that image, would you miss something? If you do, then you must add alt text. So the alt text is whatever you deem as the person adding that image is necessary for the person who can't see it to know about that image. If it's not written in the text next to it, then you must add it. So if it's adding value that is not in the text next to the image, which here it's not, I'm not talking about any of these depictions, whether the painting, I can send more information about alt text for you guys as well.
And how do you find the contrast? You were saying 71, 21 to 1. How do you find the contrast in for colors?
The contrast ratio, yes, that's a good question. So this is a tool that is easy to use. So you will see here yellow on white is 1.1 to 1, I think. So black on white is 21 to 1. 8.5 to 1 is blue. Green. So it's 5, it passes, so green passes, let's say 1.5 for pink, so again, it doesn't pass. Red, it doesn't pass, so red doesn't pass for a regular font, but it passes for the heading structure, you know, the 18 point and above. So this is contrast-ratio.com.
I have one question. So you've talked a lot about screen readers here. Are these kind of best practices you've gone over good for kind of everyone, not just people that use a screen reader?
Yep, so the font that we're using is good for low vision or students who have dyslexia. I've talked about the spacing, you know, the page breaks, also help all students with different disabilities. The font size, the heading structure, it helps everybody on in your course, not just students with disabilities even. All these tips that we've talked about help all students with or without disabilities.
Got it. Thanks. This was awesome.
Thank you guys for coming. Sorry I went